Hello, everyone. Caleb here with the Human Music Society. I've got a hot take for you. Human attention is one of the most valuable things in existence, and it's being stolen from us. But not only that, without a healthy relationship with our own attention, without full faculty of how to use our attention, then human creativity doesn't stand a chance against AI creativity. To explain why, I'd like to look at two very short stories in the most highly regarded book of human history, that is, the Bible. In this case, from the Old Testament. Given that attention is so valuable, I greatly appreciate you providing me with your attention for the next few minutes, and hopefully it'll be worth your while. So I got my handy-dandy Bible here, and the first little story I wanted to bring up is from Exodus. And it's Exodus 3, chapter 3, and it's just a little snippet of Moses and his encounter with the burning bush. And this is what it says. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. This passage is incredible because it shows how our attention has the power to completely alter our direction in life. And therefore, what we give our attention can decide the direction of our future. Now, in this story, Moses is just pasturing the flock, and he noticed a burning bush. Now, that alone is fairly remarkable, but he is in the desert, and there are some plants which do spontaneously combust in that part of the world. However, what makes it different is that the bush was being burned but not consumed. And that right there is what made Moses decide to give the bush his full attention. And that was the pivotal moment, the giving of attention, which Moses did, which changed his life forever. From then on, he's appointed by God to be the most highly regarded and esteemed prophet and holy man, both in Judaism and then also in Christianity. Besides Jesus, of course, in Christianity, Jesus is the ultimate prophet, the ultimate human, the ultimate holy man. But that burning bush moment for Moses completely changed the direction of his life and changed the course of the history of ancient Israel, and through that, the course of the entire world. All because Moses noticed something caught his attention, and instead of noticing it and continuing on his way, he gave that thing his attention. Now, to be fair, I'm sure you're thinking, well, of course Moses noticed a spontaneously burning bush in the desert, especially if the bush wasn't being consumed by the fire. But that sort of brings up an interesting point of, if you were in Moses' shoes, if it had been anything other than a burning bush not being consumed by the fire, would it have captured your attention? That's something to ponder. Because as we turn to the next story, We're going to get this from 1 Kings 19, 11 and 12, and it's about the prophet Elijah, which was another major prophet in the history of ancient Israel. The events leading up to this point in Elijah's life are complicated, and it's worth taking the time to study it on your own and really parse out the full meaning behind it. But the gist is this. Elijah is running for his life from an evil queen, a truly wicked queen named Jezebel. And this is one of the lowest points in Elijah's life, to the point that Elijah didn't really want to live anymore. He wanted God to end his life for him. Now, you would think, in comparison to what happened to Moses, who was not in a life-threatening situation or at a low point in his life, that this would be the perfect time for God to capture Elijah's attention in a similar way that he captured Moses' attention with a fantastic natural phenomenon or something like that. But that's not what happens in this story. In this story, God consoles Elijah very quietly and very delicately, to the point that if Elijah's attention hadn't been tuned in, he would have completely missed it. Here's the passage. Then he, that is Elijah, came there to a cave and lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the sons of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, torn down thine altars, and killed thy prophets with the sword. And I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away." So he, that is the word of the Lord, said, "Go forth, and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And behold, the Lord was passing by. And a great and strong wind was rending the mountains and breaking in pieces the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of a gentle blowing. And it came about, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle, and went out, and stood in the entrance of the cave. And behold, a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Then he said, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the sons of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, torn down thy altars, and killed thy prophets with the sword, and I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away." And the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus." And I'll go ahead and stop there. Now, there's some theological debate about the word of the Lord versus the Lord. That is, the word of the Lord that which came to Elijah versus the presence of the Lord which came in the soft breeze. But that's not really the point of this video. The point I want to make in this video is that there are these major natural events which took place in that moment. But they turned out to be insignificant, meaning God was not in those things. Instead, God was in the soft breeze. Now here's the question. If Elijah's attention hadn't been tuned in to notice the soft breeze, to give his attention to the soft breeze, would he have noticed the presence of God in that breeze? Perhaps the answer would be no. And because of the events which happen on that mountain, Elijah is revitalized, he is encouraged, and he continues on to do God's good work. Now, both of these stories demonstrate The importance of our attention in our lives and how directing our attention changes the course of our lives. Now, here's the question. Do you think Elijah would have noticed the soft breeze if he had been watching TikTok and YouTube videos? And even, would Moses have noticed the burning bush if he had been watching TikTok and YouTube videos? I think I would wager no. Today, our attention is more scattered, more drawn in different directions than it's ever been in human history. And due to the addictive nature of social media and the fluorescent screens on our phones, our attention is being hijacked more than it's ever been before. Let me reiterate. Human attention is the most valuable thing. And so, of course, these multi-billion-dollar companies want to capture and control our attention. And as artists, our attention is so important for the creative process. Not that we're communing with God, although I hope some of us are, but rather our attention is what gives us the power to be inspired, gives us the resources we need to sit down and to focus and to create beautiful things which contribute to the human creative spirit and to the larger human conversation. And I would argue that the quickest way for our creativity to be dried up is by letting things like the social media companies have a monopoly on our attention. Now, to relate this all to AI, well, AI mimics meaning through art. And I would say that it hijacks creativity in a similar way to how social media hijacks our attention. To keep true meaning in our lives, we have to keep the creative human spirit healthy. And to do that, we need artists who are exploring their creativity, who are exploring the world, exploring new ideas, and willing to contribute that to the human conversation. None of that happens without a healthy relationship with our own attention. Without autonomy over our own attention, that is the power to give our attention to the things which we deem important, so that we can direct our attention to the burning bushes of the world and to the whispers in the soft breeze. So today, put down the phone, even for a little bit. Let the curiosity you have for the world fuel your attention, and see how long you can keep that attention going. See how long you can be focused on something, and let that attention fuel your creativity to take it where you don't know where. But that's part of the fun. It's an adventure. And if you'd like to be one of the first members of a growing community where you can share your discoveries with other creatives, then I encourage you to check out the Discord server for the Human Music Society. The link to it is in the description below. Until next time, stay human.